beginning a little bit, I went to Fowler High School here in Syracuse, where I wasn't really the best student. I joined enlisted into the United States Navy. I was an information systems technician for 4 years. I worked with radios instead of computers. On the bottom left there is me and two of my buddies, and in the middle picture there is me in high school, and I regrew my hair. After the Navy, I went to Onondaga Community College for 2 years. I didn't really know what I wanted to major in. I took a few science classes and I really enjoyed it, and some of the professors actually let me get in on some research experiments. That picture up on the right there is with a physics professor, and we were trying to figure out how much work is put out by one of those little bottle rockets that kids attach to and they go to the field or whatever. The top left is in organic chemistry. Yeah, and it just introduced me to science in general, and I kind of learned that I liked it. And I actually learned about research opportunities there, and I went and did some internships, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. After OCC, I went to Binghamton University and majored in biochemistry, and I actually could not get into a lab in Binghamton, and I'll talk a little bit about that too, because sometimes professors are a little uneasy about taking a student who's a junior or a senior, so you might want to start looking at real internships instead of working through college. But here at Syracuse, they seem to be pretty open, and it's a pretty neat place to be. Now I'm at Syracuse University. These pictures are from the lab where I studied the protein ubiquin 2 that's involved in familial ALS. On the left there's some E. coli that we're growing, and what you do is you put some DNA into E. coli that will then make the protein that you want. It makes a lot of it, and then you just take advantage of some of the physical properties of the protein to isolate it and get it by itself, and then you can study it in a test tube. So it's pretty neat. The main points that I really want to drive home during this presentation is what is research. So what does it entail? What can you do with it? And I want to talk about the careers that you can pursue with research as well, because it's not just becoming a professor or being a scientist in a lab or being some hermit who studies the humanities somewhere and doesn't have a job. Just kidding. And I want to talk about how to explore research as an undergrad, because you kind of want to know that you like it before you start pursuing a degree that can take 7 years for some people. So research is, the idea of it in graduate school is to push the field that the research is in forward. So you start with a question, and you might have an idea of what it is, maybe a hypothesis, and nobody knows the answer, right? So you can't Google it. That's why it takes so long, because you need evidence, and you need to have it very logical, and you have to have it written down in a readable manner. So it can take anywhere from depending on the degree, right? So you can pursue a master's or PhD normally. The most obvious difference between the two is the amount of time that it takes. So a master's degree is going to take 2 to 3 years. A PhD is going to take, if you get lucky and you work really hard, it can take 4 years. Some fields, like sociology, has an average of 7 years for a PhD. I met someone at ESF who was on her 10th year of her PhD, because sometimes things don't work out. It's a very rare scenario, but it can happen like that. PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy, of whatever it is that you're studying. So some people go from undergrad to a master's program, and then they learn that they like the research and they want to pursue it more, so then they move on to a PhD. But you can go straight from undergrad to PhD, which is what I did. You might need an undergrad degree in the graduate degree that you're pursuing. So in the hard sciences, say if you want a physics PhD, you have to have studied physics as an undergrad. Not all programs are like that. I know a sociology grad student here. She took 1 sociology course as an undergrad, and now she's getting her PhD in it. So it depends on the field, and if people should express interest and want to talk to me about it, I can connect you with other graduate students who can tell you field-specific questions that you would only know by being a graduate student in that field. And you're really going to be pushing knowledge forward in general for for everyone. And the United States is very interested in this as well, and that's why they'll fund research like the NIH and the NSF, it's the National Institutes of Health, and the National Science Foundation. They want the United States to be discovering things, so they will fund you, and they want to know how you're going to be helping the United States by doing this, and they want to know the reasons for your research. So it really is it's a life-fulfilling activity as well. It's not just a job, and if you're interested in it, you'll have fun. You won't even realize that you're in school sometimes. So this was supposed to have animations in undergraduate. It was supposed to pop up first. So right now, that's where you all are, and well, maybe not everyone, but where I was. And afterward, you can go straight into the job market if you want, or if you want to pursue research, you can go the master's route or the Ph.D. And like I said, you don't need a master's to pursue a Ph.D. You can go straight into a Ph.D. program. The application process might be a little bit tougher because they want to know that you're going to finish the Ph.D. After you get those, you don't have to become a professor like in academia. That's what academia is. So you're going to go to a university and you're going to try to open a lab, or if you're working in the humanities, you have your office and you pursue a topic of interest, and you can have students under you to help you out while you're doing that. You can go into industry and you can make a lot of money doing that. You can also branch out into other areas like consultation or some patent office jobs like patent law. Sometimes they want people with PhDs just because of the way of thinking that you learn while you're in graduate school is a little bit different than what most people are normally going through. It's pretty rigorous. So they like to see that you can use evidence and use logic in the way that it takes to get through graduate school. So these are just a couple more opportunities that I've listed out. So entrepreneurship, I know we push that, and you can do that with a PhD as well if you know a topic well enough, and you can possibly graduate. You can come out of graduate school as the world authority on a given technique or a piece of equipment that you've developed, right? And that can be worth a lot of money, and you can get patents that way. So there's more than just the academia route is pushed pretty hard on a lot of graduate school students. If you decide to start looking into research, you'll notice that a lot of professors want you to just study it for the sake of it and not worry about money, essentially. You can write your own book, which is what you're going to be doing anyway. You're going to write a thesis or your dissertation, and it's essentially a few chapters that make up a couple hundred pages of whatever it is that you're studying. And consulting, because places like Google or any big tech company, anybody that's interested in science is going to want to hire someone who has done science at some point in time. So I think veterans would make a really good fit in research because these things that are needed in every graduate student is something that's instilled in you in the military, right? So it's still work ethic. You're gonna have worked harder in the military than you probably ever will in graduate school. You can push yourself more if you want to, but you're gonna have that work ethic. You're gonna know that you're there because you want to do this, and you don't have to go out and party your life away to give meaning to yourself like some other students here. So experience in the field that you're pursuing. If you want to go into biology or biochemistry for a PhD, you will not be able to get past the interview process without having shown some evidence that you've done biochemistry before. This can come in the form of an internship at the NIH, like I did. They have programs for people who are in four-year universities. They have programs for people who are in community college. They have programs for people who are just interested. They have post-bac positions where you can go after you've graduated. This is available it's not just the NIH. SU does it here. There's two people in my lab who are students at SU. They graduated undergrad, and now they're working in the lab for a year before they go to medical school or to graduate school for whatever they want to do. But you will need experience, and you want it anyways, because if you jump into a 7-year commitment, that's longer than I did in the military, and you might be stuck there, right? And you don't want to be stuck doing something that you hate for 7 years. So you want to know that you want to do it. It's just a smart thing to do. References can come from either professors of classes or from PIs of labs that you work in. And if they see that you work hard and they see that you enjoy the experience that you're having, they'll write you reference letters, and that can go a long way for when you're getting into graduate school. You'll normally need 3 of them, at least. And as far as professors of classes writing reference letters, you're probably going to want to have a personal relationship as well. So you're going to want to go to office hours all the time. If you connect with a professor at any sort of level and you want a reference letter from them, you want them to say more than you just got a good grade in their class, because that doesn't bring you out of the crowd at all, because everybody's going to have those grades when you're going to apply to graduate school. And the real desire, I already talked about that. And you already have an edge as a veteran because you are bringing diversity to research, and diversity of thought, and diversity of approaches to any given situation, right? It's a unique experience that veterans have had. A very small portion of the population has gone through anything like that. So they like to see those things, and they want to bring diversity into laboratory settings and into especially into intellectual settings. So when you're talking about the humanities and experiences that we have as humans, they need people to have had different experiences. Otherwise, they're not getting the range of intellectual thought that they want. As for research experience, it can be a bit hard to find it sometimes. A really good way of doing it, especially here because the professors are so open, is just emailing the professors and asking them to explain to you what they actually do. Like I honestly don't know how sociologists do what they do. I know the grad student, but I have no idea. But I'm sure if I emailed one of them and I went and sat down, they would tell me. And especially if you're an undergrad and you want to go find out, because sometimes the job itself is a lot different than the textbooks that you're reading. Right? So doing biochemistry with a test tube is different than memorizing the metabolic cycle in cells. You're actually doing the science, and you have to make sure that you're measuring things accurately, and you're performing all the calculations, and you're doing enough runs of it to make sure that your results are consistent all the time. It's just a different ballgame, and you might not like doing it, and you might actually just like learning, and you can go teach science. You know, it's the best way to find out is going to talk to a professor, and they might actually give you a tour through the lab. And if all things go well and you express enough interest, they'll let you come into their lab, and you can work there for a semester or 2 or the rest of your time here, and then move on from there. You also don't need to be pursuing a master's or a PhD to go work in a lab. You can just go work. A lot of the students that we have are pre-med students, and they're probably never going to do research again, but they just like students like that. Understanding how your research of interest works, like I said earlier, is that it's a lot different than reading a textbook. So you want to make sure that you know what research you want to be pursuing, so you can tailor your experience to that. You don't want a degree in cosmology and go work with cells all the time. You want to try to find a physicist here who studies cosmology and try to work under them. And know the requirements of your programs. Things like the GRE or GRE subject tests aren't even needed at all graduate schools anymore. They don't even look at it. Even at big places like Cornell, I don't think they accept GRE scores anymore. So you want to know how your program of interest is accepting students and what you should be focusing on, because some programs are different than others, even if it's for a degree in the same field. Right? Places that you can look is the NSF, which is the National Science Foundation. The NIH is the National Institutes of Health. A lot of these government agencies fund research. You can get scholarships, or they'll have actual programs. Like NIH, they have a campus in Bethesda, Maryland, and you go down there and you work in a lab. I don't know if the NSF does or not, but I'm sure they will hook you up with something. And here at Syracuse University, this is an R1 research institution, so it's really good. Right? It's top notch, and there's plenty of space in labs, and they always want free labor from undergrads, so you can go do that.
Oh, from undergrads?
Mm-hmm.
So like you can just go do science?
Yes, you can just go do science. There's a small, process to getting into it. You have to express interest because there are a lot of students who want in. But like I said earlier, you're a veteran, so you're already different, and they like that. If you go on to especially in the hard sciences, if you go on to the Syracuse website, you can read about their research, and then you just put that in different words and email them and say, I'm interested in this. I like what you do. Can I come by, and talk to you maybe? And then you might go talk to a graduate student or another undergrad that's in there or a post-bac that's in there, and they'll take you under their wing, and they will show you the ropes and show you how it's done, and you'll put together presentations, and you'll learn how science really works. That's the way to do it, is to go and do the job. And you're not going to be paid for it, but it's going to look very good on a resume.
So you can do that even if you don't actually plan on committing to a PhD. You can still just get that practice.
Absolutely,
Experience.
but don't say that, but absolutely yes.
Okay.
It shouldn't hurt you, but you don't know if it would or not, so just
Right.
don't say that. And who knows, you might end up finding out that you really like it,
Yeah, exactly.
or by being there and being around other students who work on different things, you might become interested in what they work on, and then move from there, right? There probably is something for everybody. You just don't know that you like it yet, and you go and do it, and you find out that you do like it.
And it's usually paid too, right?
It is not paid.
Oh, okay.
No, if you do an internship, like at the NIH, if you went and did an internship over the summer, you'll be paid for that. I don't know if they pay here or not. It varies from place to place. A lot of times, summer internships are paid. Yeah, they'll give you money for that.
All right, cool. I'll stop the question.
No, you're fine. Please, and don't feel like you have to wait until the end to ask questions, because I don't want anybody to forget anything. So application processes. When I applied here for graduate school, it was between October and December of the year before I was accepted. So not just this past October, December, but the year before that is when I applied, and I didn't hear that I got in until I think around April. So you have to plan pretty far ahead in advance, and you're going to want to practice interviewing and talk to other people who are in the field already, and make sure that you sound like you want to be there, and do your research on the place that you're going. If you do apply to a graduate school and they invite you to an interview, they're going to have you talk to professors that might be of interest to you, and you have to know their work, because if you walk in there and you don't know what they do, they don't want you because you're not interested in what they do. And that's going to be in any field. I can guarantee you that right now. And this is really the end of my presentation. I'm hoping that you guys have questions. If you don't, I'll give everybody my email, and we can move on from there. I don't know much about many different fields. There's research in anything you can think of, right? But I can try to connect you with somebody who does know what they're talking about. And I can answer really general questions about graduate school. Like, I should have mentioned this earlier. If you go into STEM and you're a master's or a PhD student, you're going to be paid. Whether it be through being a teaching assistant by the university, or if your professor who runs your lab has a grant and they can fund you, they'll put you on an RA, and all you do is research. And there's fellowships and there's federal grants that you can apply for. If your research is interesting enough to the United States, then you're funded the whole time, and you don't have to worry about TAing. Not all universities are like that. Some of them just don't have the money, so they might run out of TA spots. But for the most part, I wouldn't go to a place that didn't pay me, just because there's enough universities to do that. Yes. So does anybody have any questions?
I'm sure it changes by field, because I would be studying the stuff that would make me be a hermit, social science kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of times people say for grad school, like the name of the place that you go to or what kind of an institution you go to matters. But normally just for like one position or one place, and then after that, the name doesn't matter so much. Is that true for once you have your PhD? Is it like that, or does that really stick with you? Is it more about your research? Like, what's your take on that? I know you're a couple steps away from that, but
I think it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about in general, and when somebody's reading a paper and they see where you come from, then yes, it does matter, because there's intrinsic bias, right,
Okay.
in everyone. And if you come from Harvard, you're going to look better automatically than if you come from Syracuse University. So yes, that's true to an extent. For your personal self, I would, if you're interested in the research and you're not interested in getting fame and fortune, then it doesn't matter. What matters is the research itself. Now,
I feel like academia, like finding a teaching job.
that
Is it a combo of the bias and truth?
it absolutely matters for that.
Okay.
Yeah, you won't become a professor at Harvard unless you're a superstar, right? Postdoc positions, like after you get your PhD, that doesn't matter as much. They want somebody who can do the techniques and somebody who knows the research. So being a postdoc at Harvard isn't even as good as being an undergrad at Harvard, right?
Okay, yeah.
But as far as becoming a professor and moving on in academia, yeah, things like that matter. They're trying to get rid of that. I don't know how they would go about that.
Okay, interesting.
But yes, it does matter.
It's blind applications or something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They'd
Okay,
have to
cool.
get rid of names too.
Yeah.
Even names matter. Seriously,
I'm sure,
it's
yeah,
crazy. Yeah. Yeah, academia is not as high horsey as they would like to seem.
They got the cool robes though.
They do have cool robes.
Is it?
So what's your goal, Peter?
My goal right now would be to open up my own lab. I don't know if it would be at a university or not, but I also know, like I was talking about earlier, with different opportunities that you have getting a degree like a PhD, I don't know all of them. And I know that through my time, I'm going to be here for another 4.5 years, and I'm going to learn new things while I'm here. So I'm open to what I want to do in life. It would be cool to do like exobiology and like for aliens or something like that, but you know, craziness. Yeah, but I'm really open to anything. I'm going to stick in science, and I'm not going to go into industry and kind of do cookbook stuff. I do want to do novel research continually.
So what would be like first, some of these, I say everyone here is pretty much an undergrad, right? Everyone's undergrad.
What year is everybody? No, I mean, what year in undergrad?
Oh, junior.
Junior? Junior?
Senior.
Senior?
Junior.
Senior.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm freshman, I guess.
Freshman?
Yeah.
Okay. So for seniors, it's going to be, for juniors and seniors, it's going to be harder to work with professors. It's still doable, right? You can still get interested in something and pursue a post-bac. But like I said earlier, experience does matter, right? Because not only for them, but for you. You don't want to jump into something that's going to take forever and you hate it. For somebody who's a freshman, the world, is you can do whatever you want here. If you don't have any idea of what you would want to do in research, you can take time afterward. You can go and do a gap year and be exploratory, or go into the workforce and go from there. There's people who come in who were lab techs somewhere. They just had an undergrad degree in science. They go and be a lab tech. They learn about research while they're a lab tech, and then they come to graduate school after that. And they're usually very, very good at what they do because they definitely want to do it, right? It's an unorthodox route, and they like to see that kind of stuff too, right? Non-traditional students. So hope is not lost.
Along those lines, I mean, do they take references from people you worked with, people outside of academia?
No, you want them to be in the field, and maybe from industry if they're in that specific field,
Yeah.
but not like a manager at a warehouse or something like that.
If
I'm
I
not
end up
sure what
working
you mean.
I'm doing engineering, and I have a job lined up. So if I end up working with someone who has a PhD and something I'm really interested in, I work under them, and they might be a letter that might
Absolutely,
work better. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. And remember, you'll need 3 of them most likely. And if you have professors that you're kind of close with, keep in touch with them and keep those bridges open. Keep talking to them, updating them with what you're doing, what you're interested in, and they can always give you new information too.
How's the life of a PhD student? You see much sunlight?
It's busy.
Yeah.
I ride my bike here. So. Yeah, there's a lot of presentations, and you do take classes for the first 2 years of a PhD here. It's not the same at every institution, but at many of them, you'll take the course that you take. Like, I'm never going to do underwater basket weaving again. It's all like bioinformatics and microscopy and biophysical chemistry, stuff like that. So I'm going to use the information that I learned in those classes during my PhD. So you won't take any more classes that you don't need anymore. And only 2 of them. I don't have a full course load because you also have lab work on top of that. And if you TA, you'll have to TA on top of that.
Are you teaching?
I am not. I'll be teaching next year. I have a fellowship, so I got. Yeah, I'm pretty blessed. Good.
What are you going to teach?
I'm not sure yet. I'm hoping an upper level course because I don't want to deal with freshmen. I want something like biochemistry. That'd be cool. Yeah.
You said SU's an R1.
R1.
Does that carry over to social sciences? Is that something that I would care about?
It's a good
or is
question.
that-
I don't know.
No,
I can find out though.
because I know it's like a research university. There's lots of money in the Maxwell School for grants and research. I just didn't know if that was like is it a STEM
I
specific?
think Maxwell
that,
is more famous than the College of Arts and
Spend a lot
Sciences.
of money.
Yeah.
So I don't know if R1 is applicable to the humanities, but it's on that level. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Because I didn't know if R1 like if that was like a STEM specific thing or like I'm looking at other schools.
Yeah.
Should I be looking for that, or is that a distinction that would never?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
R1 is a hard science major,
Okay.
so it's colleges that fall into that. So social sciences would also fall into
Okay. Awesome.
We're an
Yeah.
R1
Thank you.
institution.
Interesting.
all of the baseball.
So tell us, sorry.
Not all fields have the same kinds of funding, right? So in the hard sciences, you'll get grants. Professors will get grants for over $1 million, and that might be why you're able to be funded and only do research and not have to TA. So something like the humanities, while they can get funding, it might not be enough to pay your stipend. So you might still have to TA no matter what, and that can be the same way in the hard sciences too, because some experiments are vastly more expensive than others, and your professor might not have the money for you because you'll cost. I don't know. We get something like around $25,000 a year. It's not a lot, right? So you're not living large, but it's enough to get by, and you're also not starving. So, but that's probably what you'll be paid. And if you TA, you'll get the same thing.
I know you mentioned having to deal with freshmen, and teaching might sound like a drag sometimes. But do you think that you can also learn from teaching? Like, does it have to be a negative thing, or
No.
even if you're not interested in teaching down the road?
Well, you might become interested in teaching.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've never taught before, so I don't know. I would just rather deal with people who are interested in what I have to say to begin with,
Okay. Yeah.
and then move from there.
Okay.
Just not set myself up for failure. And I know in the humanities you might deal more in depth with the students, right? Because they'll be writing you essays. For me, they're going to be entering multiple choice and maybe doing a formula or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'll have to talk to them in lab, but you might have to talk to them about thinking through a systemic issue or something like that. So that also varies by field and by class too, because some classes like anatomy and physiology is straight up memorization, whereas something like biochemistry requires a little bit more thought and analysis on some of the questions, and you have to draw things out. So yeah, it can be positive. Some people absolutely hate it, and it's something that you do have to put up with. But I would think that it would be fulfilling, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can get someone maybe to get into research
Just
somehow.
not with freshmen. Interesting.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know they're completely different, so I'm trying to find places that biochemistry would cross over with like international relations and
Empirical data. You have to use
Yeah.
empirical data.
So what do you think you for next steps?
Next steps with this group.
Yes.
I'm hoping that people express interest and I can start helping you explore the field that you want to more. I am here for your use, so I would like someone to to actually pursue graduate school. I mean, that would be the ideal thing. Is I actually want veterans to get into graduate school because there's not a lot, not in the sciences anyway. I don't see it. I know there are. There's just not many. It's not as represented as it could be, and that's what I want to see out of this group. And as the years come, maybe you can tell other of your cohort that that we're here to help, and we can get you to grad school. It's not impossible. I know I didn't even know what a PhD was when I went to OCC. I had no idea until I went to office hours and talked with my professor, and he explained it to me. And even then, it took me the entire 2 years to learn why it even took so long. It doesn't make sense. 7 years. What are you doing? So yeah, it's really good stuff. It's the reason why we have cabinets that close without sound is because of people doing research. Everything. You can help develop something like that.
Any questions for Peter?
I don't know.
What do you think?
No questions. Appreciate you coming down, man.
Yeah.
What is it in your track for education that takes up most of your time? Because there's always the jokes of doctoral candidates you never say what it is exactly that takes up the bulk of your time.
I think analyzing data from experiments and putting it into a communicatable format. So I'll have to tell my professor, Dr. Henley, I'll have to tell her what I'm seeing, and when I'm looking at microscope images, and sometimes I'll need pictures of a bunch of cells. So I'll be looking at a microscope all day, taking a bunch of pictures, and then I still have to analyze all of those. And I have to think about, am I being biased? Am I actually seeing this thing? Stuff like that. And then putting it into a graph, and then being able to explain the graph and know what I'm talking about. So actually doing the science, it takes up a large portion of time.
Did you talk about being published or getting published?
Getting published, right? So that is a requirement in some degrees. I don't know if it's an absolute requirement here. Some labs, I know Dr. Henley, she likes us to have at least one publication before we get out of here with a PhD. And that process is compiling data that you've had, and now it's very competitive now. Science is extremely competitive. So you're going to be working with a group of people, getting a story together, and trying to explain, we think the cell is doing this, and this is why. These are the techniques that we use. This is exactly how we did it. And it's going to go to a journal, and they're going to have other people who work in your field who would know what you're talking about, look at it and see if it makes sense. If it makes sense, then you can get published in a journal, and that is how information is passed on in this generation now. And that goes out there, other scientists read it, and they use it in their work. That's how the hard sciences is done. And some people get I met one guy. He's had 7 papers published during his PhD. So it's doable to be a big deal. A lot of Nobel Prizes come out of graduate school work. So that's a very stressful. That can be a very stressful process. And if your professor requires you to get published, that can be stressful. And so you're going to learn how to write and write in a scientific manner, or write in however. I don't know how the humanities. I really need to look into that and get back to you. So yeah, that's the way that research is communicated now, is in professional journals. People are trying to move away from that because, like we were talking about earlier with bias, it's the same thing with journals. Journals like Nature or Science, people are going to pay more attention to those articles than something that's in a lower impact factor journal, even though the science could be better. So you still have to deal with all that. It is a group of people.
Could you talk about getting into a PhD program if you have a professional master's? So right now I'm working on a professional master's at Newhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have it's not a hard science background.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately I'd like to get into maybe some kind of professor, maybe do some kind of adjunct teaching in the future. Would I have to be published to get into a PhD program with a professional master's?
So if you want to get a PhD in a hard science, they will most likely require you to have at least an undergrad in a hard science. I don't know if it's strict black and white like that, but a lot of the programs that I was looking at when I was applying, it requires that. So if you want to get into biology, you have to have studied biology. If you want to get into physics, you have to have studied physics. Not all fields or schools are like that though. So very little in life is absolute. So I think you might be hard pressed to find a hard science program that would accept something like that. But there's also other routes of showing that you're interested in biology than an undergrad degree. So they might be able to work with you, maybe if you were a lab tech or something like that. But I don't think they would take someone who hasn't had any biology background. Yeah. Yeah.
So we had a conversation a few weeks ago
Mhm.
about some schools maybe requiring standardized tests and not. And had me thinking, like, so what is program looking for? So besides for like maybe a thesis certification right on the hard sciences program you're getting into, like what maybe demographic, what type of person like is a program looking for?
To
And-
accept?
Yeah, and then like what would make somebody more desirable in that sense?
Okay, so your question is if they're not evaluating applicants with a standardized test, what are they evaluating them with? Okay, so it really is a whole picture kind of thing, right? When you apply to graduate school, you can click like I'm not comfortable with identifying myself, but they'll look at your personal identity, they'll look at the essays that you write and your life story, quite literally. They want an essay on your life story. They want an essay on why you want to do your research, because they want to know that you're interested. They want to know why, because they want to make sure that you're going to make it through. It's a hard program. People drop out, right? They have like this little master's out thing is when people come in for a PhD and they do their first 2 years and they decide they don't want to finish the PhD because it's too much and they get a master's degree instead. Some people will get into a PhD program, reach the second year where you have to take a qualifying exam, which is basically an oral exam on literally anything in biology. And then you have to write a proposal for your research, and some people don't get through that, and they'll get their master's instead. So they want to know that you want to be there. They want to know who you are, why you would be valuable to them. They look at your grades, because I think a full GPA, they'll look what classes you got and what grades you got in what classes, right? Because a B in an upper level course is not the same thing as a B in underwater basket weaving, right? Because the upper level course is very hard and it has to do with the degree that you're aiming for. They'll also look at if you're a veteran, right? So things that make you stand out, they're gonna see and they're gonna notice and they want you to come there. What else do they look at? Experience, right? You have to. When I went to interview at Michigan State University, and one of the first things that he said is that you guys are all here, and one of our requirements is that you have to have research experience to even come here to interview, right? So a lot of places they'll look at that box and say, do you not have research experience? We don't want you immediately, just like that. So experience in the field is very important. Maybe not in all fields, right? Because the humanities, you might already have to be a professional to be able to do that stuff. They don't have like washing dishes as a job for an undergrad. So it's a whole picture kind of thing. That's how they get around. And they did that because the GRE was not predicting who would be successful as a graduate student. Some places do require the subject test still, though. They might not require the regular GRE, but because they don't care if you know what blah 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 means, but they care if you can do physics. So yeah. I think those are only for the hard sciences, the subject tests.
You know, social science programs are dropping the GRE requirement, or is that?
I would imagine that they would be the first to, but I don't know.
Okay.
I think they're the ones who figured that out. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm just throwing all the horrible questions. I apologize.
No, this is good. This is good for me. I know sometimes in the humanities too, a lot of the research is done during the summertime. So like you'll do a little bit during the school year and you'll devote a lot of time to TAing because I think those are a little more intensive, like I said earlier. And then during the summertime is when a lot of professors would say that they go and do their research. So in some programs, if you're funded for the whole year, you'll be working through the summer. It's not like that everywhere, right? I think at ESF, I met some of the people who took the summer off, just because their lab wasn't funded or something like that. So they would take the summer off and then come back and continue on. And that's going to lengthen your time. So you have to think about that kind of stuff. Does the school have funding? Are you going to be okay? Stuff like that. This is also down the road. That's something that you can forget until you actually start, looking at schools for real. And right now, you should be looking at what research even, piques your interest at all, and narrow it in from there. Because your PhD is going to be, or your master's too, it's going to be very narrow. Like I said, you can do a PhD on a protein, right? And you'll have to know all about it, but that protein you'll only know and nobody else. So you'll be doing one thing for a very long time.
What does it take to like formulate a hypothesis? So you were talking about like, this is how we did this science, this is what we tested.
Yep.
I mean, do you just basically have to have like a brilliant idea coming into the program, or
No.
like, how does that work?
So some labs do want you to come with an idea already. That's pretty rare. Usually what happens is you're just interested in what the professor does already, and they have a lot of preliminary data, and they say, look, this looks interesting. Maybe we can put some experiments to do. And the hypothesis is based on that preliminary data. We think if this protein is doing this, then this will happen. And then you do your experiment. And if that doesn't happen, then you scrap the hypothesis and you try to figure out something new. That's why it takes so long, because they're usually wrong. Right? Mm-hmm. And you get it to the point where you can start predicting where something is happening, and you call that real, and you publish it. The scientific, that's at the core of everything. Not all projects are based on hypotheses. If you're studying evolution, right? So you're probably not going to be trying to predict what the tree is going to do. But yeah.
Would you say that there's like some utility in like matching your opportunities with your, like maybe you have an opportunity that doesn't necessarily match with your interests? Like, for instance, this semester I'm going to be doing observations we have a hawk nest on campus. Mm-hmm. So just doing like observations. It really doesn't map to anything to do with my degree or like my ultimate goals, but it's just doing research.
Yeah.
Am I on the right track?
As an undergrad, absolutely. I did a project at OCC where I took pictures of deer that were on OCC campus during rut. And I'm not interested in that at all. But I did it because the research method is the same no matter what, right? You're going to be basing any conclusion that you have on evidence, and you're not trying to make stuff up. And I did that. I started to go too far forward, and the professor reined me in, and he goes, no, we can't say that stuff because we don't have any evidence that supports that. We can't do that. And now the same thing applies in a biochemistry lab. And when I did the physics, I'm not a physicist, right? But any experience like that is good. And it can help you get your feelers out there, because maybe you're not interested in hawks right now, but after you stare at them for a couple of days, you'll love them, right? Right, yeah. So yeah, absolutely, anything like that.
I know that some PhD programs you mentioned the oral exams and proficiency exams. I know that some programs are very competitive. Or not very competitive, but competitive in the sense that they only allow a certain percentage through. So it's not pass or fail. It's like graded and then ranked, and then the top 2/3 or the top 3/4 makes it through. And some people say that it's good because it forces you to get published, and it like forces you to be your best.
Yeah.
But obviously also at the same time, there are people who are doing a perfectly good job, but either don't get published or disagree with their like school, and so they aren't allowed to continue.
Yeah.
Is there any like value to that, do you think, or is that just a really crappy way of them like cutting people once they've seen them after a couple of years?
Is there value to that?
As a PhD student, because like obviously I can make my own observations about it. I would hate that, but like you're trying to get your PhD or getting your PhD, so how do you think of that? Or what do you think of that?
I mean, I'm just a first-year student. MIT does that, so okay. Some places are really cutthroat like that.
Did you apply to any places that had that?
No, I did not.
Was it a consideration?
I don't want that environment. Yeah, you'll definitely have to consider what environment you're in. Like in a lab, one of the things that I'm looking at while I rotate through labs to figure out which one I want to finish my PhD in. I'm in my second of 3 rotations. One of the things that I look at is how the lab feels. right? Do I like the environment? Do I like the people that I'm working with? Because I'm gonna be there for a long time, and I don't want to be miserable. And you also don't want to seclude yourself and get really weird during graduate school because you'll have to go out into the world after that anyway. So I think an environment like that can be useful, obviously, because MIT does it. But I don't know if that's the way that things should operate, because you can also get yourself into some trouble with trying to push something out that's not true. And that happens who win Nobel Prizes, and they're really competitive, and that's how they got to that position. And 30 years down the road, something comes up, and they figure out this is fabricated, and they go back and they look at all their old research, and it's all fabricated. So you don't want something like that to develop. For me, anyway. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
Great, thank you so much. Is there any other questions? Final thoughts for Peter? Look, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate your interest in mentoring other student veterans to explore the STEM fields. It's something you clearly don't have to do, but you're so passionate. It's clearly that you're passionate about the subject matter, and also wanting to support your fellow veterans. I really appreciate that. I think that we can have more work that can be done in this space, and we'll definitely continue to collaborate and work together in the future. And I'll be sending out Peter's contact information as well as a link to the video here. We will try to get this posted up online as well for future use. I think that Peter shared some really great information throughout the presentation, some tangible things that anyone who's interested in pursuing an advanced degree can incorporate as part of their strategy, whether they're looking into the hard sciences or humanities. So again, thank you so much. We'll certainly look forward to your feedback. Give it to Peter or myself, and we can see how we want to where we want to go from here. Does that sound good?
And I do want to have like maybe form a group, and we can do things like how to read a paper, right? Because reading an academic paper is way different than reading a book. You don't even go from front to back, right? You go piece by piece first, and you flip through and you look at images and figures, and you try to get an idea of what you should be seeing in the first place, and then you go through and then you can read, or you can read a paragraph, get what you want, and throw it away, right? So I want to do things like that too, and things that will be valuable no matter where you go. Even if you just go straight into the professional world, you might have to read something that's extremely technical at some point in time, and that can help you analyze. So.
Awesome. Sounds like a great idea for our next meeting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. There's a pizza back here. Come and eat.
Did it come?
It did.
It did.